Hi, this is Adam Asnes from Lingoport. Thank you again for joining me for a short whiteboard talk, and today's topic is bridging the gap between localization and development. Now, this is a topic that comes up a lot in conversations. It comes up a lot in unconference discussions and the like, and I always find it raises eyebrows, so I thought I'd talk a little bit more about this. Basically, the problem is that when I talk with localization organizations, they generally feel like their needs for internationalization and a localization process in development aren't being heard, and in development, localization isn't truly being understood the other way. Development may feel that localization is being handled. Localization feels it's not being handled. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what happens in teams and relate it to, in particular to agile development, because so many companies that we deal with years ago, they were sort of internationalizing kind of in an ad hoc way for the first time. Now internationalization is really becoming more and more a part of the process of how people do things. So this gap is becoming ever more important to bridge and make part of the process because development is moving so fast in so many fractured ways. So let's look at the organization a little bit. I'll draw a little Venn diagram here. And over here I'm going to put localization. Here I'm going to put QA, and there's no particular order for this. And here I'll put development. And so localization maybe is dealing with issues. They're translating words, they're moving along and all. But you have these very fractured development efforts. I say fractured, it just means that they're going on concurrently very, very quickly. With an agile team, maybe you have, a sprint going on and you've got X feature being added, Y feature being added, and Z feature being added. And they're all being done fairly quickly. And localization is kind of like the last one to really get a count of what's being changed. The other issue is there can be coding issues that are now a part of that development that maybe handle collation or a calendar class, or even something as simple as an embedded string gets entered into the code. But that's not really found out by localization. Localization gets affected by that, but there isn't necessarily a process to find that out quickly. And in the middle here is QA. So for localization, an embedded string, for them, it may be a very high priority type of bug. I'll call it an embedded string or a broken sort action, or maybe the string has an encoding issue, so it looks like this kind of moji-baki kind of stuff. That's going to be considered a very important bug by localization. Maybe they're going to call it a P2, with a P1 being like, hey, the whole thing crashed. For development, in terms of their concerns of hitting a release date, that's going to be like, I don't know, P4 or P5 for development, that kind of an issue. Because functionally, the product works. They actually don't even have visibility to that issue until somebody in QA actually finds it. And the reality is that that issue may really be found here by an outside vendor. Let's say it's the L10n vendor doing some tests or linguistic validation, or maybe it's a partner. So it's completely outside of the organization. And the problem here is, no wonder you have big backlogs. If this development team is finding out stuff later during QA, during a formal QA, I'm not talking about the QA that may be integrated into the latest sprint. I'll talk about that later. If they're finding out later, not only are they finding when they've already moved on to something else, but they don't actually know where the issue is. So it gets reported to them that there's this bug and there's this embedded string, or there's this calendar that's showing up in US date format, or in this case, you're writing the number 10,000 with a comma here instead of, for some markets, you might have a period there. That obviously has a big deal for a reporting engine, but the development team still has to figure out where is that problem. So what we've been proposing here with a product called Globalizer Express, I'll write that out, Globalizer. Globalizer is spelled funny. It's like global and analyze together. What we're proposing here is a dashboard. And that dashboard is directly integrated into everything that development is doing. So in this team, and this team, and this team, every day when they commit code, or maybe it's every hour when they commit code to source control, that's going into source control. We'll make this box, this little circle is source control. Maybe you're using Jenkins, maybe using Git, maybe you're using something else completely, entirely. But when it goes into source control, there is a globalizer process that also runs, and this is quite easy to do. We set this up for you, and we set up all the way that this works, the configuration. That globalizer part is performing a static analysis. Whoop, I have to learn how to spell. Static. What static analysis means is it's actually running on the source code. Rather than waiting for some test criteria, they write the code. It looks for patterns in the source code, like embedded strings, various, let's say, collation classes or locale-sensitive methods. Those are going to vary very much depending upon the programming language. There's a lot of different programming language support. And it looks for a few other things as well. But then it automatically shows that up in a dashboard that shows you kind of nice things as you go. The other thing that it'll do is it'll look for changes to the resource bundles. So if these developers have added, say, user-facing messages to the user interface, now localization actually sees that before the release is done. They actually are part of that process because they go to the dashboard and they see things. So what happens when teams X, Y, and Z maybe insert an internationalization issue? Well, they get an ugly email. I'll call it an ugly email. Basically, they get an automated message, and you set that up in the dashboard that goes to them. There's nothing heavy for them to test. To check rather. There's nothing they have to run. Now, of course, there is the globalizer workbench, but the fact is we wanted something passive that these development teams would say, oh, you created an internationalization issue, and that issue is exactly over here. Remember, if you're finding it in testing, you still got to go back and manage that issue. You got to log it. You got to figure out where it is. The idea is that these teams are finding it right away. They can do a whole bunch of things to manage that issue right in the dashboard, but they can also drill down, and so they know exactly where to go to fix that issue. So we're talking about a much tighter loop between these organizations. Now remember, I'm not saying you now get rid of QA. People talk about pseudo-localization, creating fake locales. That's all really great. But the point is instead, find it when you're writing it. Find it when you're actually submitting the code to source, and also track the changes to the UI so that now localization knows what's coming. We do a whole lot with those resource files after to help you manage them. But the point is you've got a visible interface that unifies localization, development, and QA should be checking this also, because then they know what is going on, what is the gateway for internationalization status. Have I reduced all my issues? Can I see that all of this is clear and we're ready for a global release? Remember, the name of this, the game, is get globalized releases out very quickly without a backlog. And there's a lot of revenue and there's a lot of users kind of counting on that. And it's a pain. There's a lot of bookkeeping in here. There's a lot of hassle. So the idea is create a common platform, create something that's commonly checking what's going on, what's changed, what's happening from a coding basis, from a resource file basis, and then, I haven't talked about it, but also from a translation basis, which is all monitored here, and then what's then automatically reinserted back into the code when the translations are ready. So that's my quick introduction. Your homework, should you choose to accept it, is to go to lingoport.com and pull down the product page and go and read a little bit more about Globalizer Express, and contact us if you'd like to talk about making the process faster for your entire team. Thanks.